passe super, l'artiste, super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! De i semifinale igjen!
Hello and welcome to the Uninformed Handball Hour. I am Alex Kulesh doing the intro this time. I know some people do have some difficulty differentiating between the three of us. I don't know why, but it was my turn for the intro today. And I am, of course, joined by Brian Campion.
Hello there, Alex.
And Chris O'Reilly.
Hello, Alex. Hello, Brian. Brian is purposefully not last now in the intros, I see, which is good.
Yes, very good. Finally.
You got to mix it up once in a while, you know, you got to mix it up.
Yeah.
It's true what you say, though. A lot of people do mix our voices up, which I definitely don't understand because I sound nothing like you two guys. I mean, I can understand if someone mixing maybe the two of you up, but someone mixing me and you, Alex, up is really crazy. And it did happen to me one time. Someone wrote to me on Instagram saying, that was a great point you made about those stats. And I was like, stats and me making a great point? That definitely wasn't me.
So it's just like, oh, Brian, your whole part about the defenders was so interesting. Your insight into the defensive schemes were just fantastic.
Look, mate, defenders are only there to be gotten around or shot over. That's all I think about defending.
Oh, good. So what are we doing today anyway, boys?
We are going to talk about the best players in the Champions League this year and try to rank them and try to get a little bit competitive because my thoughts are that handball is just a little bit too friendly when it comes to picking the best players. Everyone's just like, oh, this guy's a great player, and so is this one. You know, whoever wins the tournament, he gets the MVP, but, you know, it'll come around. There's no real breakdown of the best players, the best goalkeepers, no fight about it. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to talk about the MVP after the group stages, try to rank it and project who will be the ultimate MVP in the Champions League. Additionally, we'll talk about the best goalkeepers, most improved player, and, of course, the best defender, which Brian will lead us on.
I don't remember getting the best defender in our notes before this, but I'm sure I can think of one off the fly. Where will we start? I think will we finish with MVP maybe, and we'll do the other ones first to warm up. Goalkeeper first. Yeah, let's start with the goalkeeper, the most boring position on the whole handball court. No, I'm joking. 70% of your defence, boys. Always, as Robert Ham once said to me when I was 13, the goalkeeper is 70% of your defence. So, Alex, who did you go for? It's definitely not going to be Paris de Vargas because that's too obvious for you. I know you're going to go a bit more hipster than that.
No, it's not too hipster, but I think he's also in my MVP ladder. So I've ranked my MVPs. So he will appear in that as well. But I think Andy Wolf has been the best goalkeeper in the Champions League this season. He's really excelled above or back to his really high level that we saw in Kiel and for Germany. He's, I was trying to think of a Kielce player because, Kielce have been one of the best teams in the competition so far. I was thinking, who is the best Kielce player? And I think this season, it's been Andy Wolf. He has the second most saves in the competition with 146, which averages out at over 10 saves a game, which is pretty impressive. I know Kielce play a really fast pace, but not only has he been consistent this season, he's also just made those unbelievable saves so many times. The leg above the head, making himself huge for a line player shot. And he does that continually to build into the momentum of Kielce, because Kielce are a momentum team, and a lot of the time he either builds it or starts it. So my best goalkeeper is Andy Wolf.
He was second most saves. Who was number one in most saves?
Most saves has been Tobias Tullin with 176. But I would put that down to KUG's absolutely insane pace. They play they take twice as many shots.
Hold on here. Hold on. Because I'm gonna jump to my choice here because it was. If you asked me 4 weeks ago, it would have also been Andy Wolf, but Tobias Stulin has taken the biscuit for me now. Because yes, he has a shed load more saves than Andy Wolf, but he also has a full percentage point more. At 32.5% compared to Andy Wolf's 31.5%. So no, it's not just about Georgi conceding a lot of shots. He's also made a lot of saves and a higher saving percentage than Andy. And
So,
if we look at the most recent games as well, I feel like that he's kind of stepped up as well for Georgi in the last few weeks when they've really needed him. Sorry, Brian.
so Alex, if you're not going to go with the most saves in the competition, are you kind of more going with Andy Wolf there because it's kind of he's finally doing what you thought he always should have done in a Kielce jersey? Do you think is that any way influencing your opinion on it for putting him number one when the stats don't put him in number one position?
I think there's been so many moments this season where I've just been blown away by Wolf's performance. And I think that swings it for me. Tulin has been incredible as well. But I think Wolf just has this incredible ability to just shut down the opposing team. And, go through spells of like 10 minutes without conceding. That it was the game against Nantes a couple of weeks ago where Wolf didn't necessarily have the best game. I think he had about 9 saves in that game, but basically 7 of those saves came in a period where Kielce were down by 4 goals against Nantes, and then completely flipped the game to Kielce being up 3 goals, and they all just came in this amazing flurry of saves. And I think kind of projecting as well, Wolf can influence a game unlike any other goalkeeper in world handball potentially.
Isn't that also just another way of saying when he's good, he's really good, but often he can just let goals in like a sieve. He is a bit of a Swiss. He is a bit of a Swiss cheese at times. Even now,
season.
Yes, he's had both. Yeah.
So because as in he has been consistent as well this season. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yes, he has periods that, and he's had a couple of bad games this season. But when you average over 10 goals, 10 saves a game, that means you are consistent. His saving percentage is also really high, but then he has this additional kind of X factor.
Chris, is your judgment coloured by the fact that Tulin is from Gothenburg and you just want him to be in there because he's a local?
My judgment is coloured by it is recency bias. I think not just for the Champions League, but also the World Championship in January, where he was putting up ridiculous numbers. But that kind of alerted me to what he was doing all season long. You don't get 170 saves in the last 4 games. He had to do that over the course of the season, and to do that and still have quite a good saving percentage of 32.5%, one of the best in the competition, I think deserves a lot of credit. Added to the fact that also he's finally. I'm happy that he's finally kind of making this breakthrough, because he has had a bit of a stuttering career since he moved to Germany, to Magdeburg. That didn't work out. Had another move, and then finally went to Georgi, and now it's really clicking for him. So that also makes me feel like I want to give him the best goalkeeper of the season so far.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk, Alex, about Wolf putting his stall up and shutting teams down. I mean, Tobias Tulin had 18 saves against Wisła Płock, which is just absolutely bonkers in one of the recent ties. So that's just.
But Andy Wolf has had the best goalkeeping game in the group stage of the Champions League, and that was 19 saves against Elverum. And
Elverum.
But that was a game that Kielce won by 1 goal, 27-26.
Yeah.
And Andy Wolf won them that game completely.
I'm torn between these two. I don't know. This is a tough one. My gut instinct when I came on was the first person I thought of when we agreed we'd do this was Andy Wolf, actually. But then you think about Tobias Tulin. He's I mean, in goalkeeping terms, he's fairly young. He's 27, and he's the main man at GOG or GOG. I think the next two goalkeepers are two really youngsters, aren't they? Two 20-year-olds, if I'm correct. So he's a lot riding on his shoulders there, and he probably hasn't been in that position too often in his career so far because he's probably always been the young keeper. So I think he's taken on those reins pretty well. So I'd probably then actually lean towards the pride of Sweden, and we'll give it to Tobias Tullin.
Where does Gonzalo Perez de Vargas fit in all of this for you? Because he's another player who really stands out there.
He's going to get MVP probably at the end of the season anyway. So like, it's almost too obvious. We can't go that obvious with it. Like, he's just so good all the time. It's just like, we can't almost even start talking about him. That's my feeling, honestly, which is really bad.
So the really interesting thing about this is that Emil Nielsen has been the guy in crucial times for Barcelona this season. So this was from the Crunch Time article from Handballytics on the EHF Champions League website. And Emil Nielsen has had the best save percentage in Crunch Time this season. So he has faced 12 shots, and Crunch Time is defined by a game that is within 2 goals or less going into the last 6 minutes. And Emil Nielsen has made 12 saves in games like that for Barcelona with a pretty insane save rate of 41.7%, which means that it's actually Barcelona leaning on Emil Nielsen in these really close games. And I wonder if there's a bit of kind of inverse correlation here, is that the only time that Barca are in a close game is when Perez de Vargas is having a bad game. So maybe that's what's happening here.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
But nevertheless, Barca have been in 5 games like that and have come out on top in 3 of them. And it's been Emil Nielsen. So, if we're talking about other MVP candidates, it could easily be Emil Nielsen. In terms of like saves per minute, I think he's probably right up there.
I think with Perez de Vargas as well, I'm still probably very coloured by the World Championship. It's so hard not to get coloured by those things when you think about performances as well. When I was thinking about Andy Wolf as well, I was thinking, we did well for Germany. But yeah, you do have to kind of forget that kind of stuff when you're thinking about MVP of the Champions League. But I think we'll stick with Tobias for the moment. It's only a placeholder until we get past these other games. But I think our placeholder goalkeeper.
We also don't have to agree.
That's true, but it's 2 against 1. So
very good. What do you want to go for next, Brian?
Let's go for most improved. And I presume you meant player by this, Alex. Most improved player. And I think a player for me, for me, it wasn't really improved during this season, but kind of this season's been a huge improvement compared to other seasons that we've seen them in the Champions League. And I went for Danny Cristopans, who, when you look back at his last 2 seasons, he's been, I wouldn't call him a ghost, but people have often questioned, where's Danny Cristopans? Where's that old Danny Cristopans of Vardar, and of, not yesteryear, that's maybe going a bit too far back. But in 2020-21, he scored 36 goals, 21-22, 34. And this year, I think probably with the absence of Dominic Mata, I think there was a lot more pressure put on him. And obviously Brandy's the other side of the court, but with him being out when he had that awful stabbing incident, there was a big emphasis put on him to come up with the goals. And he's done very well so far this season. He's scored 68 so far. So I think he's had a way brighter season this time around. And funnily enough, I think someone like him and Luke Steins seem to the weirdest kind of pairing of players ever, the smallest and the biggest in the league playing together, seem to match up really, really well. And one thing I've noticed in going to Champions League games, they're always coming off the bus together and always chatting before the game and on the court, Danny's and Luke before the game. I mean, proper in-depth, I do this, you do that, I'll go here, then we do this.
In those conversations, is it Luke Steins shouting up or is it Cristopans leaning down? How does that work?
Oh no, it's usually Danny's is usually sitting down and he's sitting on his knee. That's how it usually works.
So I actually I was between a couple of players here. One was another PSG player, and that is Kamil Shipchak, who, okay, his stats are inflated because he takes penalties, but he's been really impressive in attack for PSG, and he's become more of a focal point. So I think he's always had it, but not to the level that we're seeing him this season. And the other player I had was... sorry, I just forgot him now. The other player I had was Simon Sichko, because I think he's taken it to another level, and we've spoken about him really claiming that left-back position for Kielce, and, time and time again, being trusted with the big shots, being trusted to take over games where it's not just Alex Dushabayev. You have Sichko there as well.
I did go for Kamil Shipchak, and it is an improvement that I think we saw already towards the end of last season, right? So it may be a little bit, let's say over the last 12 months, there's been the biggest improvement, because you're right, his shooting stats, yeah, the penalties, right? But you still have to score the penalties, and you still have to be a line player who's given the responsibility to take the penalties, which I think he has done something incredible there that I don't still really understand how that he's taken over the penalty duties, but there he is, and he's it's his. But 83 goals this season, almost matched what he did last season, which suggests to me that he was already kind of having this upward trend. But then you look at the seasons he had before, so we're talking about Champions League here only, but in 2020, 2021, 51 goals. The season before that, 50 goals for Barca, 2018-19, 25 goals, 45 goals, 38 goals, 20. That's all his Barca stats. He's gone from being like one of the line players for PSG in a position where they were pretty heavily stacked with like Toft Hansen and Luka Karabatic, but now he is become the line player for them, and I'm really happy for him. Also, that he's doing it at this point in his career. He's 31 now, so yeah. In that sense, I think it's a very much improved player.
Actually, sorry lads, we've got this all wrong. There's a clear winner to this. It's Alex Vla. It's obviously Alex Vla.
Have him in mind as well. But was he playing the Champions League before?
Oh, he was. Yeah, he played in Zagreb for off-season.
Okay,
yeah. Oh, you're totally right, Alex.
That kind of confirms it, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
God, none of us thought of that.
Yeah, in the 2021 season, he got 10 goals for Zagreb, 59%, 3 assists, 1 steal. And in the 22-23 season, he has 88 goals, top scorer in the competition, 30 assists. He's shooting really, really well, 61%. For a player who has to take a lot of shots, that is fantastic. He is unfortunately out of the competition, so he won't be able to kind of keep that top scorer ranking. But obviously, this is the breakout player, the most improved player. He's got himself a nice contract to Aalborg, and just a revelation.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah,
that's clear. Congratulations, Alex Vla, on most improved player. Hopefully you keep on improving. It won't be a one-hit wonder this season. I don't think so. I think it'll be pretty good. He's still pretty young. I think he's about 25 still, so he still has a lot of time left. Well, let's do youngest player next then. I have a sneaking suspicion we might have all went for Danish players. I don't know. So youngest. Oh no, that's the youngest player, not the best youngest player.
I don't know who.
Just the youngest. Yeah, there's a 17-year-old in the squad. I look, when I was preparing for this, I was coming up with a lot of Danish names. I'll be honest with you. So I was trying to not maybe go for one that you went for, but I fear maybe me and Alex might have gone for the same player. But I went for, I think, a young player. Anyone under 22, I think, is quite fair, no, for a youngest player.
Yeah,
or best young player. The youngest player award. Youngest player in handball.
Do we give extra points for the younger you are, is it a little bit of a
I like that,
coordination
yeah.
system here? The younger you are, you get a bit of leeway, you get a bit more potential. Because in that case,
I reckon if you're, you get 10 goals on your tally if you're like a year younger. So 22 gets nothing, 0. You get it. That's your goal tally. 21 will add 10 goals onto it. 20 more goals. Is that right? And then if you're 17, God love you, you're probably going to win the whole thing.
I mean,
if you scored 1 goal.
the problem for me is that I had 2 people in mind. Both of them are 22, so I don't know where to go with this.
2 Danish players, yeah?
Yeah. Emil Madsen and Simon Pitlick.
Yep.
yeah.
I mean, there's only one way, only one team to look at when you're like, okay, who's got the best young players? It used to be Selja, now it's Georgi.
And I think even Selja didn't have this amount of talent.
No, they had to rely on an old 25-year-old to get all their goals. They've lost their je ne sais quoi.
So, Alex, you're the in-house Danish expert. Could you pick apart? Would you go for Madsen or would you go for Simon Pitlick in terms of their actual stats? They're very close together, aren't they? I mean, Emil Madsen has 77 goals and Simon has 2 less, is it? But
Pitlick has 55 assists, which is the key thing for me. He's got more assists than their own playmaker, Olsen.
It has to be Pitlick. He's been a revelation this season, and I think he was rested for a game for Gay in the second last round, and you could see the difference there. Emil Madsen was there, but they can't replicate the absolute insanity that Pitlick brings on the court. The just relentless battering of defenses in every single way, whether it's shooting over, shooting under, shooting through. He's just absolutely special.
But do you think the fact that they're both 22 as well, a thing which would often happen in these kind of awards, I think is it a bit silly or a bit cheeky to give Simon Pitlick Best Young Player award when he's that good? You know, we're not talking about, like, he's almost should be up for MVP rather than Best Young Player. And then we give Emil Madsen then Best Young Player.
I don't think he's the MVP though.
But he's in contention for it, no?
He is, but he could be in contention, sure.
But yeah, you wouldn't say he's the MVP. Yeah, sure.
No, I think Georgi haven't been. Yeah, I think you have to be higher in the table. Little hint into where I'm going later with it. I think Georgi. I think the Young Player Award is ripe for the teams that finish 3rd, 4th, 5th in the group.
I mean, since we own this podcast,
it's a bit like when we had that discussion. Like, is it too early to be giving Henny Reistad and Matthias Giesel the Player of the Year awards? It's like, no, they're just good now. Like, let's celebrate that now. Pitlick won't be eligible for this ever again, so we may as well get it now.
True.
To be honest, I can't really think of anyone beyond those two. The only one which I'll throw in is, and bear with me with the pronunciation here, Marcel Jastrzębski for Wisła Płock, who is 19 years old and he's a goalkeeper. So he gets the bonus for being a younger player. And while he hasn't had the best season, he had potentially one of the greatest games we've ever seen from a young player. And that was his 19 saves against Magdeburg, which got Wisła Płock a huge win, 25-24, and basically allowed them to qualify. So that's just someone to look out for. And he's 19, so he gets those bonus points.
He gets a lot of bonus points there. There's one other player who is 22, so no bonus points there. But I think in the context of the team he's gone into and what he's done with them, I think deserves a lot of credit. It happened in the last bonus pod where Sasha forgot he was so young. It's Erik Johansson. He is another good shout, I think.
Yeah.
Victor Halgersson also in Nantes is only 22, so I remember he had a few decent performances this season, so he'd be also on the shortlist for that.
Has to be Simon Pitlick. He's an absolute superstar. He is, he's going to be at the top of world handball for many years, and this has been his breakout year. And let's see where he can take KOG. They're not done. I don't think. The game against Aalborg is going to be really exciting. He's going to be crucial in that. And then, up comes Barcelona in the quarterfinal. And, if anyone can beat Barcelona, I think it's some plucky young Danes.
You heard it here first. Okay. So, Simon Put.
All right, now I think we need to get into the real juicy stuff. Now it's time for where we tear up our bonds of friendship, throw them into the fire for the sake of this debate.
I want to put a primer here. So I think for the other awards, we've kind of been talking about the leader during the group stage, but I want to give you a challenge. So also, we're talking about who is going to be the MVP at the very end of the whole tournament. We're not talking just EHF Final Four MVP, because that's its whole thing in itself. Yeah. But if we're talking about who is going to be the MVP at the very end of the tournament that encapsulates the full performance of the competition, kind of build that into your predictions.
With that, Alex, take us away.
Do you want me to give my full ranking here?
Give your full ranking.
Please do.
So in fourth place on my ranking is Andy Wolf, who I spoke about earlier. I think he's been the best goalkeeper in the competition. And I think he has a real chance of becoming overall MVP if he does put in those insane performances. Third place, I had Luke Steins, who, PSG have been very good in this competition. They... Actually, hold on. We didn't even talk about Petr Nenadic in at all. We'll get to that.
That's true.
But Luke
so much going
is
on.
going to get Petr Nenadic beside him on the court. And he's been the top assist getter in the competition, 95, which is miles above everyone else. About close to 30 above Rui Silva in second. And he's also been scoring really well. He's just got 50 goals, but shooting 78%, which is pretty damn sweet. And, this is his team. PSG is his team. So if PSG do finally win the Champions League, it's going to be his achievement. Second place, I've got Christiansen, who is just unbelievable. And in top place, I've got Dika Mem, which might shock some people, but I do have Dika Mem as number one in my MVP ladder.
Okay, give us your case for Dika Mem.
Dika Mem, he has 74 goals in the competition, and he's shooting 64%. Exactly, 64% exactly where you want a 9-meter shooter like that. But as we've kind of spoken about in the last couple of podcasts, and it's something that I've, always questioned Dika Mem about, he has stepped up when they need it most. And he's actually the top crunch time scorer for Barcelona. So he basically scores a goal every time, at least a goal every time they're in crunch time. So he scored 4 goals in those 5 games. And, it just feels like this is his team as well. Again, we talk about handball's quite an equal sport, and there's so much built into a team, but finally it feels like this team is going where Dika Mem takes them. And I can see this route all the way to the top, and Barcelona have just been the best team. They've just been incredible. So I think he has to be at the top.
Okay. When I was looking into this, I was looking at the top 2 teams, the teams that have won the groups, and I'm like, okay, they have been both fairly dominant. Like, what are the key attributes to this? Which are the players that really drove it? In Barca's case, it was Dika Mem was one of them. Yes, Gonzalo Perez de Vargas was another one. A third one who I'm not going to go for, but he is my second, let's say, nomination from this, is Ludovic Fabregas, who I think has been really good this season. He's been good on the attacking front, 58 goals, but also brilliant in defense. 12 steals, I think, is among the top in the Champions League this season. And just every time I've seen him in the big games for Barca, he has been an all-action player, both ways, doing everything. And often in the real big matches, either the player of the match or one of the top three. But I did go for Luke Steins as my MVP of the season so far. And also projecting ahead, because as you said yourself, Alex, if PSG finally do it this season, it will be his team and it will be him who's done it. A ridiculous. Like he has destroyed the assist stat this season. I think he's a good 30 assists ahead of anyone else in the competition. 95 this season, 50 goals as well. And PSG don't do this too often, but when they do steal the ball, it's also Luke Steins. But yeah, he's made this team 100% his own. He's already, since he came to the club, was kind of jostling for that, but now it is it's clear to see it's him. And I think what has brought them to this number one position in the group, which in itself is maybe a little bit of a surprise if we look back to how we thought about PSG at the start of the season. And if they were to go all the way, it'll be him who is the MVP.
So who would you have second on your ladder?
I'm going to stick with Fabregas. Third on my ladder, Simon Pitlick. And fourth, even though I don't think he's the best goalkeeper, for whatever reason, Andy Wolf as well. Because looking because of the looking forward bit, to projecting to who the overall MVP could be, Andy Wolf.
What about you, Brian?
Right, so I have a list of 14 players here. I'm just going to go through them. Fifth place, I couldn't pick between two players, but I think I might be swayed by something you said.
Well, you have a
Chris.
fifth place.
And
a sixth place, it seems.
Well, it was a joint fifth place. Joint fifth place in my B list. No, I'm joking. So I had Fabregas and Morito for joint fifth. And I put Morito in there because just the times I've seen Kielce play this season, he's always just there to turn the screw for Kielce when they need it. And I know we don't like to give it to wingers when they're just going on fast breaks all the time and taking penalties, but you do need someone to score those goals. And he can be as cold as ice for them. And you're pretty much guaranteed about 6 goals with them every game. So he's going to be, you need someone to score goals, and he's always going to be there for you. But maybe the defensive output by Fabregas maybe has pushed him up the list. And he's also has 50, I think it was 58 goals as well. So he's having a very strong season. Fourth place, I actually then went for Shipshack. I know, a bit of a weird one, but I thought he is a guy who has stolen a lot of headlines, really, and become a very unlikely hero for this PSG team. And we've always seen him over the years being a very decent, strong line player. But this season, and coming in and just kind of shaking it up, and it's such a club to do in it as well. It's not a club that you think you can just walk in the door there. I mean, he's been there since 2019, but this season especially, he's kind of really stamped his name on not only the starting lineup, but the man who's going to be taking the penalties. And in a club like PSG with all those big names and egos and whatever, it's I remember at the start of the season, we said, Chris, that, they've signed all the nice guys now, but maybe somehow Shipshack doesn't seem like such a nice guy. No, he's a lovely guy, don't get me wrong, but in terms of on his court, his on-court persona, he's a bit of a bad arse as well, so it's good to see him kind of develop into that player. Number 3 then, I'm actually just going to swap these around here right now. Dika Mem in third position. And I've moved up Luke Steins to second position. So my number 1, bit of a weird one, but Chris Jansen of Magdeburg. With his age, 23 years old, he's just out of our young category award.
Is that why you said it at 22?
No, I just...
To be fair, there's a lot of 23-year-olds around.
There's a lot.
Yeah. But I think he's the absolute engine of that Magdeburg team, and he's an absolute joy to watch. And I just think he just gives them really something special.
Yeah.
And with his age and his 74 goals, I think he's a good shout for MVP. Will he get it? I don't know. I mean, obviously.
So, as we've kind of talked through this, and I skipped over Christiansen a little bit in my ranking. I had him second. But I think I'm going to bump him to first. And there's, the more I think about it, Magdeburg have qualified for the quarterfinal. So they are through, and actually they have one of the easier ties in that quarterfinal if it does come out. So I think they have a real good chance of getting to the final four.
Yeah, just to be clear, they're going to play the winner of Nantes-Plotzk, yeah? Just for people who don't have it right beside them.
Play the winner of Nantes-Plotzk, which I definitely knew off the top of my head there, and I wasn't looking up as I was talking. And I'll go back to the Crunch Time article as well. He has been Mr. Clutch this season for Magdeburg. And it's been his performance in those games is unlike we've ever seen before. He scored 10 goals, which is the most out of any player, from 11 shots. So if you're stuck, give it to Christiansen and he'll make it happen. And we've seen it time and time again in the Bundesliga, in the Cup. He's fearless. He also has 40 assists on top of that, and he's just shooting an absolutely insane 75% overall, because he just gets to the 6 meter line. Every single shot is really good. So when you kind of look towards the season, I want to add in the fact that Magnussen is injured for Magdeburg. So that's a factor that can't be ignored. Magdeburg have managed to qualify for the quarterfinal directly, which is a huge relief for them, I think, with the schedule they have. They are in a prime position to get to the final four. And then, you have this guy who can win any game for you. You have a player who you can give the ball in tight games. And there's going to be tight games quarterfinal onwards. So he can just, he can just do it. And, I kind of gave Dicamem props for his 64% shooting percentage. He as a backcourt shooter, but just don't shoot from the backcourt. Go to the 6 meter line like Christiansen if you can.
Yeah,
Dicamem can't do that.
Probably why is such a high percentage is because the way he throws himself at the 6 meter line is like, I'm either going to score or get a penalty here. There's nothing in between. I guess in a way, the way you're framing it is also a little bit of like, who do you want to, if you're looking forward, a true MVP is the player you want to have the ball in your hands for the final seconds of the final. Luke Steins, Dicamem, or Christiansen, or Andy Wolf. I'd say Christiansen. with Luke Steins a close second. If Luke Steins has 20 meters to run at you, I'd give it to him. But at the 9 meter line, Christiansen.
I mean, as you said, Alex, as well, like they do have, well, obviously they're skipping the playoff match, so they'll have an extra game rest there, but also playing the winner of Nantes-Plotzk, which they would have to fancy themselves going into that. And to think that with their huge huge break that they've had over the years and not being in the Champions League for so long, it's quite the story. Those guys coming back in and then in their first season back, making it all the way to Cologne. And the support with the German teams getting Cologne as well. It could be quite the story. And if Christiansen then was to pick up MVP, it'd be an absolutely incredible tale.
I really want to disagree, because you're basically going two against one here, right? With Christiansen. I'm going to stick with Steins. But I think it does go to show with the players we've spoken about in two cases of PSG and Barca, like showing just why they're as good as they are, because there are 2 or 3 players for each team that are in this conversation. So Kristapans or Shipshak or Steins for PSG, Fabregas, Mem, Perez de Vargas perhaps for Barca. There's just players there on both teams that are, on a given day at the Final Four could be the MVP. But you're sticking with Christiansen. Brian?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll stick with him. But I tell you what, I will move up on my list for as much as it. I don't know if it means anything to you, Chris. I'll move Luke Steins up to second.
You did already.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh no, I put him from. Oh no, I did. Sorry, I actually moved. Honestly, he moved way up on my list. Actually, he was down in fourth. He's been bumped up twice.
I still have Tikamem as my second in that because I just believe in Barcelona more than PSG. Christiansen at the top. Who would have thought? Even a couple of months ago, it was all Magnussen. But actually looking back, those crunch time stats that I talked about, a lot of those games happened early in the competition, in the first round of games, where Magdeburg had some really tough games. And Christiansen was the player, even though Magnussen was there. So it's, not too much has changed.
Now, here's a question for you. Could Magnussen do it the way he does it without Christiansen? Christiansen is proving he can do it now with anyone. Kai Smits. But could Magnussen do it if Christiansen wasn't there working with him? Would he be the same player he is for club and country because he has the same guy beside him?
Yes. Yeah, I think Magnussen could do it.
I don't see why not. There's no evidence to the contrary.
No, yes. I just wonder if there's something, if there's something so special about this combination of players that really unlocks Magnussen's potential in a different way. Because Magnussen has been around for a while, and it just feels like the addition, like Christiansen beside him in comparison to Marco Bezjak beside him, or Christian O'Sullivan beside him as a few years ago, feels like that has unlocked a new level in him. It's chemistry, like you'd have in FIFA, player chemistry.
Any players you can think, we have focused on the top 4 teams who have all progressed into the quarterfinals, but we have some playoff games that, as we mentioned in our last podcast, we're very excited for. Any players from those teams that you can see emerging into this discussion? So, Chris, you had Simon Putlik up there.
I think Putlik is.
Do you think
one?
Do you think he really has MVP potential? Or, right now,
Simon Putlik had MVP potential at the World Championship. So yes, he can do it in the Champions League as well. Yeah, if they do like you suggested there earlier in the podcast, Alex, they beat Aalborg and beat Barca and get to the Final Four, then there'll be there'll be a couple of people involved in it. Madsen, Putlik, and Tobias Tullin. And young, not so young anymore, Jere Tolbring, doing the business out in the left wing.
Yeah, I mean, it's someone like Rasmus Lauge for Veszprem as well. Like, he was probably their best player against PSG, and he was, we all remember what he did at the World Championship in the final. So he has those big games and he can still pull out some massive performances. Has had a good season so far as well. Like, but yeah, he surely is in contention. If someone like Yahya Omar wasn't injured, you'd also probably think that he could have got pushed on to do great things.
Here's a name for you. And because he wasn't in this conversation at all, which is kind of funny, we consider we haven't had a conversation like this for years without mentioning him, because he has been injured for much of the season. But if Kiel are to go all the way, it has to be Sanders Augustin, who is the key guy to drag them one last hurrah with the boys, with the Zebras, before he goes to Costa.
Yeah, it's been quite enough, hasn't it, in that regard? When you think, we talked a lot about him in the build-up to the World Championship, but in terms of the club front, yeah, we almost, as you said, Chris, we almost forgot about him, didn't we?
But he hasn't been quite the same out of the injury. He's still just finding his form, and he's been too up and down for me, I think, even in the Bundesliga. So Kiel lost to Leipzig, and Sanders Augustin ended up having a good game, but he was having a stinker at the start. He was 3 from 8 or 3 from 10 to start the game, but then scored 5 in a row to finish 8 from 15. And it just seems a little bit too up and down for me. Can he hit form and take Kiel all the way? Currently, I don't think so. I just don't see that happening. It's hard to say that about an amazing player like Sagosen, but I just don't see it happening.
Any other names you throw in there, Alex?
Lauga was actually, if I was going to have a fifth on my list, it would have been Lauga. He has been the kind of rock for Veszprem this season. He's the only player who's just seems like the only player who's really, really focused. And he has 65 goals in the competition, which is very impressive. 45 assists. I think he's there. Let's see if the dynamic changes when Remeli comes into that squad. You know, what will happen. But if Veszprem stand a chance, it's going to be Lauga they're leaning on. But again, something that might happen, but I just don't see it right now.
When Aaron Parmelson signed for Aalborg, you probably would have thought, if you asked someone back then of potential MVP names for future Final Fours, you probably could have thought, well, if Aalborg get there again and Aaron Parmelson's in the mix, he might be a name that you'd be throwing up there. But I think it's safe to say that he's been, probably okay for Aalborg. He had a very good last game. I think he scored 10 against Celje, but overall it hasn't really worked. And now he's moving on to Iceland. So his venture in Aalborg hasn't been amazing. It's safe to say. Or what do you think, Alex? You've seen a lot more of them.
Yeah, and Aalborg have just been terrible.
Yeah,
like there's no kind of pussyfooting around this. They've been very poor. They scraped into the playoffs. Technically, they're relatively safe, but they just haven't been good enough. And as a whole team, I just don't see them doing anything this season. Even if Aaron Palmerson plays well, he still has those flashes. And but how many years in a row are we going to say that Aaron Palmerson is the most amazing player in the world for 15 minutes of every third game? I'm not going into that again. Last point I just want to mention on Christiansen, and we didn't talk about this, and maybe that's why originally I had DKM ahead of him. He doesn't defend.
Not much.
Yes.
So,
yeah. But that's because Magdeburg have their own very unique system.
Yeah, it works, and he doesn't have to, but... if we're talking MVP, you can't ignore the defense as a whole. But out of all of our top players, Luke Steins doesn't defend. DKM is becoming a better defender.
4 steals this season for Luke Steins. Defense comes in all shapes and sizes. But yeah. Speaking of players, before we go, who don't defend but could be MVPs, you mentioned him there, Peter Nenadic, leaving Veszprem in some sort of disgrace, which I still don't know the full story about. Maybe we never will. But he's signed for PSG. How about that?
That's just wild.
It's a bit of a mad one. Anyone who has talked to anyone who's played with Peter Nenadic in the past, and I remember we were working at the EHF Cup final and we were talking to some of the Fuxa players after the game. Not to throw them under the bus, but I'm going to do it anyway. He was off drinking on his own and doing his own thing, very much his own man. So I think it doesn't probably take a lot for someone on the coaching staff or some sort of fracture to appear with Peter Nenadic. He seems like a very strong-willed personality, and maybe that PSG will suit him perfectly. It's only until the end of the season, but yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Does it really work with Luke Steins and the fast backcourt they tried to play there with Peter Nenadic, who's a guy who just never wants to pass the ball and holds on to it for so long and slows down a lot of attacks? It's a bit of a random one, I think, in terms of their style of play.
I think it's high risk, high reward for PSG because they do need a left back. Prandi is their only left back. They do have Karabatic, obviously, but he's been kind of in and out of injuries throughout the season. He's not the same player, really. And it could work beautifully. It could work. And, they only need him, they can still rely on Prandi because Nenadic is kind of coming in to a team for half a season. He's not going to be able to assert himself and be the alpha dog, or probably wouldn't expect to be the alpha dog in a team like that he's only temporarily there for. And maybe he plays a role like Palmerston in Barcelona back in those days where, you know, you're stuck. Nenadic gets you 4 goals and you win your Champions League semi-final. And that's all you need from him. You just need 15 minutes from him at the right time. Or that can just blow up the team and everyone hates each other. So high risk, high reward.
That's what comes to my mind. It's like Nikola Karabatic tries to set him straight and he ends up just like getting in a fight. He's a bit like that classic sitcom trope of the bad boy and his new girlfriend each time is like, oh, I can change him for the better. He's going to be my project. And then eventually they just give up on him. I don't think he's exactly that type anymore. Hard to really say without knowing the full details of what he did to the team or to Momir Ilic outside of his house, if that's true. But yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll find out. When we find out, we'll talk more about it. But until then, we can look forward to that. I think in the who you'd prefer, Nenadic to your team or Remili for the second half of the season, I think Vesprem ended up doing quite okay with Remili.
I think so too. We'll leave it there for today. Thanks again. Thank you to all our Patreon listeners. You mean a lot to us. I love you all individually so much. Thank you from... That's a strange one. Okay, I'll start again.
No.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then. Thank you from me, Chris and Alex. We'll see you next time. Keep watching handball. Keep writing to us. Stay in touch. And au revoir. We'll see you next time.